This meeting to order. If we could, we'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and our Vice Chair, please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I'd be honored to, sir. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Ms. Fano, Ms. Gutierrez, Mr. Meyer,
Present.
Secretary Wolf, Treasurer Weinberg.
Here.
Vice Chair Martinez,
Here.
Chair Jimenez. We have
Here.
a quorum, sir.
I have a motion to approve the agenda.
Mr. Chairman and board members, we had asked to add an agenda item, 7A, and in consideration of the item and in consultation with council, we don't really need it. It was already approved that before as part of an ILA. I can do this administratively, so it doesn't need to be an approval item on today's agenda item.
So we will withdraw it from the agenda, and you can do that administratively. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda without that particular item in it?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes. Thank you. So roll call, approval agenda, declaration of voting conflicts. Since we have nothing to vote on, there's no declaration of voting conflicts.
No one has a
Okay.
conflict today.
All right, citizen comments. We give all citizens an ample opportunity to express their opinions or comments in front of the board. Does anybody in the audience wish to come before the board?
Mr. Mayor, may I take this moment to make a comment?
Sure.
For many of us who sat on this board, this last week we lost a great leader of transportation in Miami, in Maurice Ferre. I had the honor and the privilege to sit on this board with him for many years, and even when we disagreed, he was a man of character, and he truly loved this city, and he truly loved this county. What I'd ask of the board and of the members here is if we have a moment of silence in respect for Mayor Ferre. I believe that would be appropriate, as he was an active member of this board for many, many years.
Definitely is appropriate. So in honor of former Mayor Maurice Ferre, former board member Maurice Ferre, moment of silence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any citizens wish to make a comment? Please come forward. Seeing none, citizens' comment period is over. Chair's comments. I want to reiterate what the vice chair said about Mayor Ferre, and I knew him. I did not have the privilege of serving with him on this board, but obviously knew him when I began my career as a firefighter in the city of Miami. He was the mayor of the city of Miami. And he's been rightly called the father of the modern Miami. It was his vision. And what struck me about the mayor was that he always was looking ahead, never looked back. Really forward-looking, looking into the future, trying to make Miami a better place, trying to make Miami a better place to live, helping out in transportation. He had great ideas on transportation, right to the end. And so I'll always, treasure my time with him. I consider him one of my mentors, and a good friend. And Miami has had a great loss. And I've said it on numerous occasions that if Miami had a Mount Rushmore, he'd be on it. So we're going to miss him. His services are going to be Thursday at 10 o'clock at I think St. Mary's Cathedral in Northwest 2nd Avenue, and the Archbishop will be presiding over the funeral mass. So 10 o'clock, it's open to the public. Anybody wish to attend, I certainly will be there. So put it on your calendar. Thank you very much. Approval of summary minutes.
Move.
Been moved. Got a second? Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Executive Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To give a brief update on what we've been up to the last month or so, all the procurements that were approved by this board last month are underway. There's a lot of work to be done, and I got to appreciate board members who are acting as oversight. We're getting this going. I also want to thank and commend procurement staff because they're expediting all of this. There was about 9 procurements that were out the door, that are going out the door. On Fridays, typically, we put it out. We send an email to the board members notifying them of cone of silence. If there's any questions, please just contact us, and we'll clarify if there is a cone of silence or isn't on a procurement. But there's a number of items that went out. I wanted to inform the board, and many of you know and some don't, that we were nominated as Government Agency of the Year by the Latin Builders Association. We didn't win, but we were greatly appreciative of the recognition by our local builders. We have put out a lot of construction work over the last, few years, and you're starting to see the results out on the highway. It's, when you get recognized, it makes you feel that you've accomplished something. And today I want to recognize one of our employees, and he doesn't work at MDX. But he is an MDX employee. He's a PIO on our construction projects. Gregory Harlston works for Holt Communication. He's a PIO. There he is. Stand up, Greg. Stand up, Greg, because, most of the time when we're doing construction, we're at the tip of the spear, and people don't like that they're being, traffic is stopped, or that there's noise at the houses, or so-and-so. He's out there every day dealing with the community, and one of the community associations actually presented him with a plaque of appreciation for resolving their issues out in Fontainebleau, and we're appreciative of what you do. You are MDX. We're only 29 employees. We depend on our vendors and our contractors, and we appreciate what you've done, Greg. So. What I really wanted to speak to the board about, and real quick, was I was given the privilege to attend the 87th annual IBTTA meeting in Halifax, Nova Scotia last week. And I've gone to 13 of these events, and typically it is, everybody's, in a celebratory mode, and there's issues that are talked about but glossed over. This meeting, and I came back and I told Mr. Toledo and others on my staff, the topics that were discussed were of urgent importance. The mobility as a service, mobility in the urban areas, just looking at some of the topics and some of the presentations, integrated mobility, can innovative transit help save congested urban tollways? And that was given by Mr. Ed Regan. The role of tollway operators in the provision of mobility as a service. This was given by the managing director of the Tollway Authority in Athens, Greece. This is not a United States issue. This is a worldwide issue of what's the best way to manage your assets and provide the customer, the consumer, a seamless connection from point A to point B, which may include a ride on a toll road. It may include a ride on a transit system or a bus or a scooter, or walking. And, I listened to a lot of these presentations, and it was interesting because 5 years ago, I presented as my theme, the business of mobility. And I remember that the fact that we were talking about transit in an urban setting, that's a no-no for toll agencies. You do not divert revenue from tolls to transit. And that's not what we were talking about. What we were talking about was continuing to provide value to toll payers as growth continues, because every urban city, every urban area wants to continue to grow. Unless we close our airport, our seaport, and turn off our sun, we're going to continue to grow. So how do you handle the growth on our facilities? And if you don't start looking at alternate modes within those and the best use of those corridors, we are going to be falling behind, and we're doing a disservice to our customers. That was heresy in the toll industry. And the fact that you have a whole meeting agenda and a whole issue, and it's happening all over, whether it's Spain, France, Italy, United States, all over the states, people are addressing this, tells you that we're starting to listen to the consumer. Consumer knows best. The consumer knows best. Provide them a reliable, safe, affordable means to get from point A to point B, and let them make their decision. And I think that is the most important thing. And I want to read you a definition, because I always, I I write these things down, and I got to give Chairman Maurice Ferre credit for this, because, you know, Chairman Ferre sometimes made my job really difficult, because he always had me thinking. There wasn't a meeting we didn't go to that he didn't have me meeting with somebody, learning something new, challenging us on what we did. And I started learning to write little things at different meetings and making notes. Well, I heard many definitions of mobility as a service, but this one struck me. It's a little bit long-winded, but listen to the words. Mobility as a service is the seamless, infinitely adaptable delivery of mobility together with associated travel planning by providing alternative modes of operation, traveler information, and necessary ticketing and payment services provided by a personal digital interface for all modes of transport. In other words, make it easy for a person to plan their trip from point A to point B, and we as infrastructure providers should just lay out the groundwork and let them make their decision. With that, I'll close and answer questions, because I think we're headed in that direction, board members, and we just need to keep our eye on what the goal really is. Okay, I'll close with that.
Questions?
I'd like to make a remark, if I may.
Sure.
I'll be speaking at Team Florida in a few weeks, and
Next week, or 2 weeks?
yeah, 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
And I kind of wondered how popular some of what I was going to say was going to be, because it's not about maximizing tolls. It's about maximizing service and providing mobility, which is FDOT's mission. And one of those things I'll talk about is something that FDOT is currently considering. And we'll be reviewing it at our executive team meeting in October. And that is the trying to get more people to ride share on 95 Express. Currently, you can register 3+ people and get exemption from tolls on 95 Express. And because you have to pre-register, it has to be a fixed schedule, hardly anybody does it. It's about 0.5% of the people on 95 Express are getting that exemption. And we're looking at methods where people could register immediately one day. Any 3 people could register. And we're looking at how we can do this through private vendors that would do this as a transportation service, and could certify to us that there should be a toll exemption on this transponder on this day. And we can do the back office for this. And methods that, technology methods that exist are somebody's cell phone, GPS. 3 people, 3 cell phones, 3 GPS signals, certify that there's 3 people there. It could also be done with 1 phone and facial recognition. There's 3 different people in the car at the beginning of the trip, 3 different people in the car at the end of the trip. And this is getting in line with services, mobility as a service, and we're just one element of that. And it may well be that the unifying element is going to be people's smartphones. That's where they get their connections. So we're looking at how we can apply this technology, and we don't think it's a victory that only 0.5% get an exemption for the tolls. We'd love to fill the lane with people getting an exemption and having at least 3 people in the car.
Thank you. That leads me to comment on a new app that is part of, we had something called a fast track process, which I sponsored. And actually, it was Maurice Ferre who brought Singularity University to Miami-Dade, and part of the Singularity University process is this fast track process. And so we now have, we had a competition, we had a winner. There was a prize of about $100,000, and today I met with the winner. The winner is an application on your smartphone called Velos. And Velos, what Velos does is that it, Velos, V-E-L-O-S, Velos, right, like that. And what this does is It tries to change behavior by rewarding people. And on this app, you'll have Uber and Lyft, and you'll have new apps that are going to join people that are going to the same place, so that they don't have to take one car. They can take one car for multiple people. And then all of these trips that you take that are non-car based, you get a points that you can redeem. And what's interesting about this is that you can redeem your points with Uber, and you can redeem your points with Lyft, and you can redeem your points at Miami-Dade Transit. You can redeem these points that you accumulate, but you always have to use the points on a transportation mode that will not utilize a car. And what's interesting also is that you may take a ride in Uber, which will accumulate points that you can then use on Lyft, and vice versa. And you can take a ride on transit that then you can, if you have a scooter or something, then you can get on a scooter and redeem those points. And so the winners are very bullish. They already have a lot of investors that are looking at this application. It's going to be launched in Miami. We're already beta testing it in Miami. And there are people that are already redeeming their points. And so one of the things that we can do also is you can redeem these points, grab a Lyft or an Uber, go to a train station, take a train station, accumulate more points, and then use some of those points to grab another Uber, Lyft to give you the last mile. And so be very interesting. I think I'm going to send them to FDOT to talk about how we can also incorporate that issue of tolls and toll reduction into this application. But that's going to be, this will be the wave. And then what we talked about today is, instead of having to download Uber and Lyft and this and that and all that, it's all be one stop right here. You just go to this one application. It'll tell you, it should tell you in the future, if you do this, this, and this, is going to take, this is how long it's going to take, this is how much it's going to cost. If you do this, this, and this is how long it's going to take, this is how much it's going to cost. If you do this, this, and this, your carbon footprint is this, your carbon footprint is that. And so you will have an educated choice of how to best, move around this town. And if we just get doesn't need to be a big number, 5, 10, 15% of the people who start utilizing, multi-person drives just with a car, we can actually put a big dent on traffic here in Miami-Dade. So it's right again. It has a tie to Maurice Ferre. Always looking towards the future. And Singularity says that Miami has been the best case for rapid deployment of a solution in their fast-track process. And so we're really, really proud of that. We're going to be launching that. We're going to be announcing it sometime in the next couple of weeks. You'll see advertising on all of the Miami-Dade Transit vehicles, trains and buses, et cetera. And we want to make a big dent in the way that we move around this town. And so, we got high hopes for this application and this reward and point system that they've developed. It's really interesting. So anyway, everything circles for Maurice Ferre, right? So we're really going to miss him. So again, thank you for your report. General Counsel's report.
Yes, sir. Just two matters. On the ETC, the appellate arguments have been set for November 12th, 2019. It's been a long time. They were just backed up, and I announced last time it would be October, November, but it's November 12th, 2019. And lastly, the motion for rehearing is set for Thursday morning. We'll let you know what happens immediately after. And that's it.
Please keep us advised that what happened in the motion for rehearing. Does it appear that the judge will rule from the bench, or is it something that they take back and issue some kind of order?
He hasn't made that indication. The papers are submitted. He set it for he set it for Thursday.
Fair. And how long is the hearing for?
30 minutes.
30 minutes.
Yes, sir.
Are there two sides to it or just one?
Yes, there's two sides.
Two sides.
We filed a response.
So 15-15.
Well, I don't know if it'll break down that way, but let's
Whatever.
hope.
Okay. I don't think we have to say much. Okay.
No, sir.
All right. Thanks. All right. TPO representative is not here.
No, Ms. Fano is not here. There is a TPO meeting on Thursday of this week, so I'll be attending. There is the long-range transportation plan of 2045 is on the agenda, and I think the biggest item is going to be the discussion. I think there's a discussion item on North Corridor. I think that consumed the majority of our TPC, our Transportation Planning Council meeting. I think the presentation is going to be made, and we'll be there to listen in.
Interesting report that came out of FDOT, and with all due respect, Mr. Secretary, I vehemently do not agree with the findings, but that's a topic for another agency. Thank you. Treasurer's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are actually deferring our treasurer's report for next month, when we will also have our external audit completed, and Marie will have, so Marie, you have the night off today. I'll just touch up on a couple of things. So we will have actually our full auditor's report, come in and report on next month's meeting. I did want to touch up on two things. One is our cashback rewards program. You had requested some of the zip codes, the breakdown. We have some preliminary numbers, which I think are fun to share. So here are some of the cashback highlights. In total, the week before Thanksgiving, checks will be heading out, $5.9 million in total for the 51,000 users who qualify this year. And of those 51,000 users who qualify to get this money back, 96% were Miami-Dade County residents. 4% were Broward County, most of whom were from Hollywood, near me. In that, the biggest, highest numbers of zip codes within Miami-Dade County were, of course, City of Miami at 22%, West Kendall, understandably, at 14%, and then you've got Hialeah and Homestead and South Miami at 5%. So those are our biggest users for our cashback program. So look for your check in the mail. I was very happy to hear, I sat with Marie for a couple of hours today. I was very happy to hear of our rate of return of the checks that we do issue. 98% of them do get cashed out. Last Friday, everybody had the last day to have an opportunity to update their address. So your checks are coming in the mail, literally. The check will be in the mail soon. So we're very proud that we were able to still provide that for our users. Now, the second thing I just wanted to touch on when it comes to our math, which I'm very proud of, our math, is relative to House Bill 385. There's a provision in the bill in Section 16 requiring, on top of our regular audit that we do every year, that the Auditor General of the state of Florida by October 1st, meaning in a couple of weeks, next week, the Auditor General shall submit a report to the Governor, the President of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House, assessing these three factors, these three things. One of them was the financial situation of our agency. I had to look that up because this is my 14th year in public service. You're a numbers guy. I never heard the term financial situation. But that's what they wanted of our agency, including assets, liabilities, revenues, et cetera. The report is completed. Marie spent, they actually spent most of the summer here in and out. Marie provided everything that they asked for. We were, of course, and her staff, of course, cooperative as we always are with everything. Bottom line, the draft report that is not out there before they complete it is a positive finding. Our financial situation is good. So that's that, and by the way, that's a public report. We have it in our emails. If anybody wants to see it, just request it right here at MDX if you don't want to go through the state. The second part of that section, which I found very interesting, was to conduct a financial feasibility study on the toll rebate program that they had, promised under this bill for up to 25% rebate. There were 4 projection forecasts for each of the potential, 25%, 20%, 15%, 20%, 15%. There was really no forecast in any of those, if you multiply how many they ended up doing, that actually provided an ability within our financial situation to provide any rebate, okay? So that was a no in simple terms. And then the third factor of that section, which I found also interesting, was to conduct a financial feasibility on the rate reduction, which has been a topic of conversation with us over the last couple of years. So actual rate reduction on toll. So the folks from the state who came down and did this feasibility study to see if we could reduce rate anywhere from 1% up to 5%. Again, 4 different projections, forecast projections at 5%, 4%, 3%, 2%, 1%. Of all those possibilities, zero, none of them allowed us, with our math, with our budgets, to do an additional toll reduction. Not, of course, without cutting on some major projects and programs. So, and even if you did, on an average, let's say 2% reduction, if we want to be a little conservative, and an average user, I said to Maria, okay, well, what is our average user? How much money are we spending? I'm in Aventura, so I come down here, I do the 95 Express. I spend a lot more money, I'm getting no reduction. So our average user on our roadway is $1.32. Okay, so you do that twice a day. If you have a 2% reduction, twice a day, 5 days a week, 26 weeks in the year, boom, 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 do the math, you'll save a total of $6.80 a year. This is the part of the bill that, the promise to our Florida, Miami-Dade County Expressway Authority users within that bill. So, but the financial feasibility requests and the studies did not support the ability for us to fund that. So I thought those were very interesting coming in from the draft report. I encourage everybody, or certainly everybody on the board, should read that, and then they should finalize that by October 1st. I don't see, Maria, unless you think differently, that would change from the draft to the final, and it's very much in line with what we already knew, and what Maria and her staff have been adamantly working on. So bottom line is that we have the same information they had, and they come up to the same conclusions we've always had. But it was a good exercise, I guess, for them. So next month, we'll have the full treasurer's report and, of course, the auditor's report. But I just thought I'd share that with you guys. That's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Do you have the average, what is the average amount of the rebate check? Do you know what that is?
Oh.
When we showed all the numbers, it's roughly in the $65 to $70 range, is the average check.
All right.
And I think we had a highest around 300.
Goes up
wasn't?
and down.
Yeah, the average was around 65.
Hold on a second, I'll tell you.
What percentage of the toll?
It's got to be a higher number.
It's got to be a higher number, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
59,000 people, 5 million, it's got to be a higher number.
It's the average.
More like,
There you
yeah,
go.
okay.
Yeah.
So the average check coming back on our cashback rewards program is $112
There you go.
for users, which is a lot better than to have the $112 check in your hand the week after Thanksgiving than to save $6.80 at the end of the year.
$6
I
over the
think.
course of a year.
I mean, I'm no mathematician, but yeah.
Yeah.
Board members, this is the issue. This is the part that I've been saying, that as a board, we're going to have to sit down based on everything that's happening and happened, the consequences that have occurred, and we're going to have to rebuild our capital program. We're going to have to reprioritize. We're going to have to figure out what we can afford and what we can't afford. There's always scenarios. If you do nothing, of course you can reduce toll rates, because why have toll rates? But if we want to deliver, infrastructure to the community that the community needs to get from point A to point B, or part of their point A to point B, then we need the money to be able to pay for it. And we need to figure out the lowest cost of that capital. And that's going to be an exercise that I know that Ms. Schaefer, and I know Mr. Topol, and I know Mr. Reagan, it's going to be a painful exercise, because it's going to require us to maybe have to change some of our priorities from the past. What is really important to this community at this particular time, and let's move forward. And I think that's an exercise that we need to do as a board. And we might just have to set aside a day to sit down and go through this exercise. But we'll do it when all this is over.
Your numbers are so big that just a 1-year delay on any of these capital improvements replenishes, or just a slowdown allows you to replenish, so you should be okay.
Yeah. You might have to just delay some projects, and it's basic. The point is that we have to do it because we have to get the TPO to approve a 5-year window, and rather than piecemeal it, we'd like to take back and say, look, this is an affordable plan for this 5-year window, and this is where and these projects fit in. It's gaming, work program gaming.
So one thing is that we've done is that, yes, we've, now for those folks, I guess we approved, $250? Was it 200, you have to have $250?
$150 spent a year.
$150, okay. You have to sign up, which means that it means something to you. It's over $100 back. And, but also, there's the other side of this, what this agency has done to improve mobility, because there's been tremendous improvement on the 836. So we need to document that. You know, the time savings on the 836, I think are tremendous. I think you hit the snag at 17th, right? Because we haven't finished that project yet. But all the way to like 17th, it's pretty smooth. It's really smooth. And getting out of downtown, once you get past that, 17th, once you get past that bridge, it's pretty smooth, all right? Until you hit the 826, okay? But for our part, I think, this agency has done a tremendous job, and that's one of the reasons, when we have to, put that out, so look, we have probably saved a bunch of time already to the folks in, that were coming from Kendall. The problem from Kendall and those areas is still, there's only one way to get there, and you have to battle all the traffic to get onto the 137th Avenue extension, or you got to go all the way to the Turnpike, one way, and you're battling everybody all the way to get there. It takes you 40 minutes probably to get to the Turnpike. Everybody's on the Turnpike, but once you get to that 836, it's pretty smooth. Okay, so kudos to you, Executive Director, for the planning. I have missed my exit every once in a while, and I curse you for that, but because then I have to, God, I forgot now it's over here and all that. But once you get used to it, it's pretty smooth, and did a good job. And so now expect the same thing with the project that takes it to the Signature Bridge there on the 836.
The public doesn't realize, and I know it's been expressed, but when that project is completed from 17th Avenue to Biscayne Bay, about 80% travel time savings issues because of that backup of people on 836 trying to get onto 95 north and south. The approved project, the double decking, splitting the movements, is going to improve traffic almost 80% in that area. It's going to tremendously change the way people get in and out of our CBD, our central business district, which is important.
Of all the things that you've discussed, whether it was the app or whether it was the ride share or whether it was the rebate, if every day you save time and it's a smoother ride, that trumps everything that we propose, that we hear. That's the number one item that everybody is suffering through. You're just sitting there. If we can alleviate that, that trumps all other incentives, solutions, or benefits that we can drive.
That's all the people are asking for. They don't mind, I don't think, paying, as long as they're paying and moving. They mind paying and stopping, all right, and being stuck in traffic. They mind that. I mind that tremendously. I don't mind paying. You want to charge me $1 to get from here to there? My time is worth more than that $1, all right? My time with my kids, my time with my grandchildren, and my family, my free time is worth a heck of a lot more than $1 or 50 cents or anything like that. So if this agency did something that politically may have been, and I've said it before, is that they needed to see the improvement before you up the tolls. Okay, even though in the end, what was done will actually save money in the end, okay?
And
But
we don't need a communication strategy to deliver that. You live it, and you don't need to be told. There's no talking points. It's just you can just feel it, and you know that the improvement has been made. That's all.
But I respectfully disagree, Mr. Roberto. We do need a communications. We do need to live it, because there is still an effort out there to confuse MDX with every other toll agency that's out there.
So Martinez, I wasn't suggesting that you don't have one. I was contrasting the point between the experience and and what you're hearing.
But
But
I
I'm not
think we-
suggesting that you eliminate the communication strategy.
But I think and the reason I brought it up is because we have spent an enormous amount of time in the years I've been here trying to minimize the importance of a communication process, and I think we need a stronger one, because I think that's been one of our greatest mistakes in the years I've been here, is that we haven't done enough to, what you just talked about, Mr. Chairman, our accomplishments. And if we minimize the importance of that, I think we're going to continue to fall into the trap of those who want to blame MDX for literally everything that's going wrong, whether it's 826, the Turnpike, everyone else. There is an effort to try to meld everything into our responsibility. And that's not new.
That's
That is-
true. That's true. And I've been trying to educate the public as the best I can, all right?
You have.
All right, so, and it's amazing to me that I still think that somehow these roads, a lot of these roads are MDX roads, and nope, not MDX roads. But,
I started on Twitter.
Say what?
Hashtag not an MDX.
not an
road.
MDX road, yeah.
I like that.
You actually put in that little app, a little game, you know, if this MDX or not MDX, right? Yeah, okay.
I wonder if you'd like to have the Palmetto.
No, we don't want
we're
the
good. You
Palmetto,
can
thank you. I will take the Turnpike, though.
We know.
All right, so, discussion items, the Kendall Parkway update.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, board members, I asked Albert Sosa, who is our program manager for the Parkway, to give the board an update on the latest developments, give you a refresher. There's been a lot of issues. Primarily, we've started the permitting process with the Army Corps of Engineers, and I wanted Albert to walk you through and bring you up to date where we are and where we're headed. So, Albert. They got,
Members,
There you go.
bear with me a second. Why is this? Okay. So I'm here today to give you an update. My name is Albert Sosa with HNTB. I'm here to give you an update on the Kendall Parkway and where we stand today. The last time we did a formal presentation to this board was in this November, December of last year. So it's been quite a bit, and we've had quite a few developments since then. If you would recall, the Kendall Parkway is a 14-mile extension of the existing State Road 836, beginning at the terminus today at 137th Avenue and roughly Northwest 12th Street. Then it hugs the urban boundary down to approximately Southwest 136th Street, where you'll find the Kendall-Miami Executive Airport. There are a number of interchanges along the way: 8th Street and 157th Avenue, Bird Road, Miller, Kendall Drive, 104th Street, 120th Street, and finally 136th Street, where you do have the terminus. The purpose of the project is to improve system connectivity, improve access to and from the area, major employment centers, educational centers, commercial centers, improve mobility for the people and goods to serve existing and future travel demand. It's also to improve hurricane and emergency evacuation, and it'll serve as a multimodal corridor providing those types of opportunities, such as express buses, non-motorized access as well in terms of bicyclists, pedestrians, et cetera, will be able to use the corridor. The typical section for most of the corridor from Kendall Drive North is a 6-lane typical section. So you'll have 3 lanes in each direction, along with the use of the shoulders for express bus service. The inside shoulders will be available for that. There's also 3 potential transit envelopes that are being left as part of this corridor. So if in the future, Miami-Dade Transit, for example, Miami-Dade County or another entity wanted to provide a transit connection through here in a fixed guideway system, they could utilize the right-of-way that's being purchased for that purpose. If you'll notice off to the right of the typical section, we have a multi-use recreational trail that runs the length of the corridor. It serves as a linear park, pedestrian access, cyclist recreational access. It'll run the length of the corridor. We should, and I'll note it later on, we've been able to do that recreational trail as we've moved forward with refining the design in such a way that it does not create an additional impact to the wetlands and the sensitive environmental areas along the project corridor. We're actually incorporating it into canal banks and into the berms that create the drainage impoundment areas associated with the project, so we're not creating an additional impact because of these. So it's actually worked out quite nicely. In terms of the multimodal function, we're looking at constructing 2 park and ride hubs, one at Kendall Drive and one at the terminus near the Kendall-Miami Airport. These will provide, again, along the inside shoulder of the highway, express bus service during the peak hour in the peak direction that will connect to the Dolphin Park and Ride, to potentially to the MIC, and ultimately to the Central Business District here in downtown. So it'll be, it's incorporated into the project. It's not something that's being considered or contemplated. It's actually part of the project. It's a requirement that we do that. And you'll see the pictures, the renderings at the bottom of the screen that you're on is what the station would look like in the center median on Kendall Drive or just north of Kendall Drive. So the buses would not have to get off the highway and get back on. You'll actually be able to get onto them right from the median to facilitate the travel times, increased travel times.
Okay.
How do you get to there?
I'm sorry?
Get there?
So you would have a park and ride adjacent, and there's a couple of different ways that we're looking at to access the actual central platform. So it would either be almost like a tunnel, pedestrian tunnel to get there, or along Kendall Drive, you could actually walk along Kendall Drive for a short distance from the park and ride, and then access it through the median from the south. Yes, from the south to north. So we're looking at different scenarios on how you could do it. An overpass is also a potential, but we think from the ground it's going to make more sense at this point.
How short of a distance are you talking about for the walk? Because let me tell you, from my experience with the temperatures that we suffer here, the longer the walk, the less likely people are going to use it. That's just a reality.
That's definitely a consideration. It's a couple hundred feet. It's going to be 300 to 400 feet. It is a walk.
So if you look at the tennis tournament that happened in Key Biscayne, when they took away the pedestrian crossway through the avenue, it was the #1 complaint was for the tennis. It was just it was a much shorter span. Going to your point, Mr. Martinez, is that you're right. I mean, I would definitely be cautious of that because eventually they had to get away from the bridge and just stop traffic because customers were complaining so much.
No, mine is just personal experience from working downtown, just walking from up to the people mover that goes around. It's warm out there, and it's especially in the summertime. If we want customers to use the park and ride, we need to make the location as stress-free as possible. If I'm going to be sweating up a storm when I get up there, I'm just not going to do it. So we need to look into that very carefully. If you're talking about a couple hundred feet, we need to reevaluate that, Mr. Director, because that's just too long. I don't know if you agree with me, Mr. Brewer. That's 50 yards.
Yeah. No, it's a valid concern.
Because
Absolutely.
just from personal experience, it is, especially if you're in a suit or if you're wearing any kind of, if you're having to go anywhere professionally, it's a challenge. So we need to look into that, please. Thank you. Sorry, sir.
That's it. So I wanted to get into a little bit of detail now as to where exactly we are in the process, because there are multiple paths that are occurring right now that it's worth everybody knowing about. So in terms of the project development study itself, the PD&E study that MDX began back in 2013, it actually originated from a concept report that began back in 2007, evolved into a project development and environment study. And that process led to a public hearing in December of 2018, so a little less than a year ago, where a recommended alternative was arrived at. And the project environmental impact report was finalized and executed in June of 2019. So that's the local document. That's MDX's document that documents why this corridor was selected. And it's a big document, right? It's over 10,000 pages. It's very comprehensive. It's summarized in a 100-page document that's known as the PIER, so but it's very comprehensive. The key requirements that we looked at when we were evaluating the corridors is how to avoid, minimize, and mitigate for potential impacts, because we do have to recognize that there are impacts to the natural environment and to the built environment as well, depending on which alternative you evaluated. And we also wanted to make sure that we were compatible with the Comprehensive Everglade Restoration Plan, and SERP. So let me touch on that a second. So SERP. Back in the 1990s, a group of projects were developed and ultimately approved by Congress in what was known as the Yellow Book. The Yellow Book contained a number of SERP projects all the way from the headwaters, which are up near Orlando, of the Everglades down through Florida Bay. So it's many projects, not just in this area. There are specific projects in this area that were known as the Bird Drive Recharge Basin. So the Bird Drive Recharge Basin, if you can imagine Chrome Avenue to 157th Avenue, 8th Street down to Bird, a 4 square mile area, was envisioned, it's actually goes a little bit further south, but if you can envision that as an above ground water storage area where water would get pumped into when it was wet, when the Everglades the water level was too high in the Everglades, and they would get pumped back into the Everglades when the water level in the Everglades dropped in order to promote water flow. And this was a series of, this is one of many projects. So in the 2000s, the different agencies, namely the South Florida Water Management District, that was charged with implementing these projects had to, detail all these projects out, right? So they had to figure out how to get them accomplished. What they found was that their original concept for the bird drive recharge area was not going to work. The soil in the area is very transmissive, it's very porous, so you couldn't store the amount of water that they wanted to store there. It wouldn't function that way. So instead, they developed a concept which is focused on the half mile immediately east of Chrome and the construction of a conveyance canal there that would connect the canal that's north of 8th Street in that area, which is the C4, down to the C1N, which is at approximately 120th Street. And it would contain pump stations at either end. You would pump water into the canal, same kind of thing, but it was a much narrower area. So that concept was developed in the late 2000s by South Florida Water Management District, and in 2011, before we began the PD&E study, there's actually a resolution of the South Florida Water Management District Board which says, hey, the original concept wasn't going to work. We came up with this new concept. This is what we're going to pursue. So as we developed our project, we wanted to make sure that we were compatible with that conveyance concept that was now the SERP project. I'm calling specific attention to that because as we've moved through this process between the Department of the Interior, the Army Corps, South Florida Water Management District, the EPA, all these different entities, there still remains confusion among them as to what SERP is in this area. So as we move forward in the permitting process, we're actually litigating on the CDMP process. It's a theme, right? It's something that's continuing to cause issues because there's a lack of clarity on what the SERP is in that area. I can tell you that the Army Corps is working internally to get everybody into consensus as to what the project is. And I can tell you that barring something unforeseen, whatever they come up with in terms of what the final concept is, we'll be able to find a way to make our project compatible with that. We're making it compatible with the concept that we believe is the one that South Florida Water Management District has represented to us as the one that's moving forward. If something different were to move forward, we would find a way to make it work with what we have. We don't see that as a deal breaker. In terms of the CDMP amendment, so the Comprehensive Development Master Plan, the county filed an amendment to amend the CDMP to create a new transportation corridor. This is a new transportation corridor. That amendment was filed in October of 2017. It was ultimately approved by the County Commission in September of 2018, so about a year ago. That was subsequently challenged in court, and I'll get into the details of that. In terms of the key requirements that came out of that CDMP amendment process was this requirement that whatever impacts we had to wetlands, we would have to mitigate on site. So rather than us buying mitigation credits in a bank that was somewhere else, the fact that we're having this impact at this location, the county is requiring that we mitigate for those impacts at this location. So I think it's a win-win for everybody involved. The county also placed a restriction on us in terms of the West Well Field, which is our drinking water source in that area. It's close to Chrome and Kendall Drive is where the wellhead is. Durham has certain restrictions as to what a road can or can't contain in well fields in general, and I'll remind you that most of the well fields, a lot of the well fields in Miami-Dade County are actually in the urban area, right? So like Hialeah is just north of Miami Springs. They're drawing from underneath that area. There's some to the south, there's some to the north. Alexander Orr is under State Road 874, actually, that well field. So
We live on the majority of our drinking water.
absolutely.
So the misconception is that somehow our drinking water comes from the Everglades. It does not. We're standing on our drinking water right now, okay? And that's where we get our drinking water from.
That's correct. So in order to provide further assurances that our project would not have a negative impact on our drinking water, the county placed additional restrictions than we would otherwise face on our project. And this included having our project corridor stay out of the 10-day travel time contour. A travel time contour is basically, if I were to drop a drop of water here, how long it would take to get to the wellhead on average. So 10 days, normally we can be within the 10 days. It's not a big deal. But they created a restriction which pushed us further away from the drinking water wellhead, and that's for the better. So it's something we're complying with. The CDMP amendment also required that we submit a master plan for approval by RER, by the county. That's something that we've submitted now. They're in the process of providing comments, and we've already received some comments from Durham, so we're working through those. The CDMP amendment process, it was the county's process. The county was challenged by the Audubon Society and by Wonderly and Limonar Holdings as the plaintiffs. And that actual
Who are they?
administrative, Wonderly and Limonar
Is that Green City?
They're landholders, and yes, they do coincide with the Green City development. So it's the
Cities.
landholders that are north of Kendall Drive, between 167th and 172nd in some places in that area.
They're potential developers.
Yeah. So the
Our,
Audubon Society.
our proposed right-of-way, our proposed alignment cuts right through the entire development. I
It does
believe.
impact their property. Yeah.
Yes, and that's why they're against. You have developers lining up with the Audubon Society, yes.
Yeah, I just
So-
wanted to hear that.
The process, I mean, the administrative hearing actually took place the last 2 weeks of July. It was pretty comprehensive. It's still active, so the proposed orders are not due until November 15th, and I think the judge will take a month or two to rule on it, so it's actually quite a complex case. I can tell you from personal experience, from being there, I didn't hear anything in the hearing that made me take a step back and say, hey, we didn't address this, or it wasn't done correctly. I felt comfortable that what we had done with the project made sense from that perspective, and it would hold up to the scrutiny. We'll see the outcome of the hearing. What I did find unfortunate is that tens of thousands of pages of documents, weeks of testimony, and the soundbite that made it out was the project will save the average commuter 6 minutes.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you, and I was waiting to go to that, because that's exactly what I want you today to clarify, because that's the soundbite we heard.
So-
Days of testimony, thousands of hours, 95% of people in Kendall in support of this project in West Kendall, and the only thing we heard about is that small soundbite. So if you can clarify that, it would
Sure.
really be appreciative.
It's unfortunate, and I think that the mayor did a very good job of penning a memorandum that described more accurately what was happening out there. So from a global perspective, I can tell you that our PD&E study did not, in any way, shape, or form, anywhere in that document, quantify any person living in Kendall going anywhere in any specific place in Miami-Dade County and said, this is the time savings, right? It's just there's an infinite amount of locations and permutations of origins and destinations. So there's not a table in there that you can point to and say, Albert Sosa that lives in West Kendall saves 6 minutes when he gets to work. It's not there, right? I can tell you that as a matter of fact. What was cited in the court hearing was a specific table in the documents that points to a statistic that's known as vehicle hours traveled, right? So we have a 75 square mile study area. And that statistic says that all the trips throughout the course of a day, there's thousands of them, tens of thousands of trips. It includes commuters, it includes people that are going to the supermarket in the middle of the day, it includes somebody that's going to the gym at night, it includes somebody that went to visit their grandchild at 2 in the afternoon, right? It's not indicative of any specific trip at any specific time of day, it's indicative of all of them. The statistics showed that overall, over the course of a day, for all the trips taken in the study area, you would have a savings of about 5% in terms of vehicle hours traveled. We use that as a general indicator to show, does our concept, is it heading in the right direction, right? Are we making things better or are we making things worse in a global perspective? And what we found is that on a global perspective, the project does make things better in Kendall. But that statistic is not relevant to any specific commuter trip. So during the trial, under cross-examination, there was the notion, that was the question asked. So if the average commute is an hour, I don't know where that came from, but if the average commute is an hour and you only save 5%, that's 6 minutes. And that's where that whole 6 minutes came from. And I don't find it to be representative of any specific commute. I definitely can tell you that our documents do not show a 6-minute travel time savings. Subsequent to that, what we did is we looked at, because of all the brouhaha that ensued, I don't know what the correct term is, we did look through we did document travel time runs. That's part of this traffic study that we did of existing conditions. Is we actually have what's called the floating car method. Somebody's in the car, they don't go faster than traffic, they don't go slower than traffic, they just go with traffic, and they time how long it takes to run along certain routes. So we're able to look at those routes and say, okay, so right now it's taking people from West Kendall to get to the Turnpike, 30 minutes. To get to the Turnpike on 836, 40 minutes. It's quite a bit of time just to get out of the study area because they don't have access. They don't have connectivity. And as you can imagine, if you live on 157th Avenue in Miller, the traffic builds on the way to the heft, right?
At the end of the day, you're landlocked because there's only one way out. You have to go to the Turnpike.
Once the Kendall Parkway is in place, and there are interchanges that are immediately adjacent to West Kendall, not immediately adjacent, but adjacent to it, and you reduce that travel time, right? Those savings are significant. Depending on where you are in the study area, it's 20 minutes. It could be less, it could be more, right? Specific instances that we looked at would be in the 20-minute range, 30-minute range, 15-minute range, so it's in each direction, right? And that's significant when you think about it. If you can save somebody 40 minutes a day, 30, 40 minutes a day, it adds up, right? I mean, it ends up being a huge number. So it was a bit disappointing. That's what made it out of the whole process, but I mean, that's reality, and we'll wait for the administrative law judge to rule. And I would expect that there would be an appeal depending on the outcome. So, we'll see how that plays out here in the coming months. And we'll continue to monitor it and support the county in their preparations for their proposed orders. Any questions on that before we move on?
Yeah. So that was a CDMP amendment. You got more on the permitting activity, so why don't we just go through everything and then we'll come back and ask you questions, okay? So go ahead, continue.
So in terms of permitting activities, we have a few different things going on. We submitted to the Army Corps back in March. They open up a public comment period, a review and comment period, where it's not just members of the public, but it's also different reviewing agencies that actually provide comments. So we've gotten comments from Fish and Wildlife, we've gotten comments from the EPA, members of the public. We are not the driver when it comes to that, right? The Army Corps is the one that's the federal entity. So they've received about 500 comments from what we understand. Many of them are form letters, so a lot of them are duplicates, right? It's just basically a form letter that got submitted a few hundred times. So they're currently in the process of weeding through all those different things to tell us which ones they would like MDX to respond to. Some of them will carry more weight than others. I can tell you that the EPA letter that was submitted on August 23rd, and there was a subsequent follow-up letter issued last week, is part of a standard process that's laid out between the EPA and the Army Corps. It's based on a 1992 Memorandum of Understanding, which lays out how the EPA provides comments to the Army Corps. So they have to issue what's known as a 3A letter, which is, we've looked at this, we need more information, we think it may have an impact. Then they have to issue, and it's very regimented, right? Then they have to issue the 3B letter, which is the one that came out last week, which said, we have not yet reviewed additional information, so at this point, we think this will have an impact. We need you to consider the same thing that was in the first letter as you move forward with the permitting process. It wasn't anything unexpected because the Army Corps has yet to, they're still going through their process, so they haven't turned around to MDX and said, please respond to this letter. But because the Audubon Society attempted to introduce it into evidence into the administrative hearing for the CDMP, we did prepare a response that was provided to the county that they utilized in their filings related to that EPA letter. And I can tell you, in preparing the response, there wasn't anything in there that caught us off guard. There was no surprises. There wasn't anything there we didn't expect. At the end of the day, we've been with this project for many years. We know there's tens of thousands of pages of data and analysis. We know where it is. These reviewing agencies have one person in 30 days, right? So what they do is, they write a letter to say, hey, I need more information on these things, right? And it's right, wrong, or indifferent, I think that's what's happening. And in all of the points that are brought up in the letter, we are able to provide the appropriate documentation in the documents that already exist as to what the answer to those questions are, what that additional information is. So we look forward to continuing to work with the Army Corps. We have yet to, we've met with them on several occasions. We just met with them 10 days ago. It was a very productive meeting. So the coordination's ongoing. There's no surprises so far, but it's a big project. It's a challenging project, so we expect the coordination to continue. South Florida Water Management District is similar. We're applying for a conceptual ERP to cover the project area. We've had a number of pre-application meetings with them, almost a dry run, if you will. So they've provided us some comments, or some not comments, they've provided us feedback on our documents and asked for clarification, additional information that we'll subsequently prepare and submit it as part of the formal permit application. The idea being that when we do submit formally, it'll be a smoother process. So that coordination is ongoing. No surprises there either. Miami-Dade County, the RER master plan submittal that was required as part of the CDMP, that was submitted. We have received some comments. We're still pending others. Subsequent to that, we will submit for a formal DERM permit. Because of the volume of this project, the DERM permit will it will go to the County Commission for approval. So that's something that will be for county action at some point next year. With FDOT, we'll have to approach FDOT for access connection permits as well for our connections at Tamiami Trail and Kendall Drive. We expect to submit those later on this year. This is somewhat of an iterative process. So the connections with FDOT are prescriptive, right? FDOT wants to know where our ramps are, what they look like, what modifications we'll make to Kendall Drive or to 8th Street. Some of the comments we're getting from DERM and we expect from other agencies change how we connect, right? So avoid this impact, move this ramp here, move this ramp there. So we're still getting those types of comments. We don't want to submit something to FDOT, then FDOT will ultimately, in 6 months, say it's not up to date anymore. So it's an iterative process, and it'll happen with all the agencies. The Army Corps may give us a comment that we address, and then have to take that up with South Florida Water Management District or with DERM. So we got to keep working on this until we get to a point where we have everything in place. Also wanted to provide an update on right-of-way activities. That's been pretty intense as we move forward. So we do need to purchase quite a bit of land for the project. And right now, we are only doing a willing seller program. We have not begun an eminent domain process. None of the work that we're doing now on the property side is under the threat of condemnation. We're dealing with willing sellers. And we've closed or are under contract for about 156 acres. We have another 50 acres or so, we've made an offer, we're negotiating, things are moving along, and we expect to be able to close on that. And actually, subsequent to this, I was just talking to Mr. Glass, who does our right-of-way program. We actually, over the last few days, have made contact with an additional 25 parcel owners, and they look to be amenable. There's more than 25, but we have about 25 more that are amenable to be willing sellers. So we're working with them as we move forward. One of the things to note, and it's on the diagram that you see in front of you, the boxes that are in red, those lands that we touch were purchased with federal funds specifically for Everglades restoration, right? So they have encumbrances. In other words, the federal funds came with strings attached and said they can only be used for this. But if you no longer need it for that, right? If you no longer need it for Everglades restoration, you can sell it. You can do certain things with it. What we are doing is, because the current comprehensive Everglades restoration plan project, the Chrome Canal conveyance concept, is just to the top of this page. It's that half mile that's right adjacent to Chrome. Exactly. So we will. What we're working to do is buy land in that area that is more beneficial to South Florida Water Management District and to the SERP efforts, and then swap for the land that is no longer beneficial to them, right? Or that they no longer need for their project. So right now, of the acreage that we show, the almost 200 acres that we show of willing sellers that are either purchased or about to be purchased, about 75 of those qualify for that. They're in that half-mile area. And we ultimately will need about 190, 200 acres in that area. So we're well on our way to achieving that goal. It'll be quiet for about a month. We won't have a lot of closings, and then all of a sudden we close on 10 of them, and the acreage increases by 50 acres. So it's been moving forward. We've actually been pleasantly surprised by our progress there. And the last thing I wanted to touch on was the different procurement opportunities that are associated with this. The strategy was to create a number of projects of different sizes, some design build, some straight bid. That way there's more than one opportunity. And it also allows us to move forward quicker with the implementation of the project by having multiple people working on it. So in the end, it'll be 4 design build projects along the main line. There'll be 10 separate construction procurements for smaller arterial projects, or the multi-use trail that we talked about, or the park and ride facilities, for example. About 20 consultant procurements between the designers and the CEIs and the material testing firms, and about 10,000 jobs created by this program. Some of the early activities that we're seeing now is 83634. 83634 is phase 1 of the Kendall Parkway, if you will, right? So it's the missing movements at the interchange between the Heft and State Road 836. Right now, you can't go, if you're going southbound on the Heft, you can't go westbound on 836, and vice versa. If you're going eastbound on the extension 836, you can't go northbound on the Heft. So there's missing movements there. One of the things we found early on when we started looking at the Kendall Parkway was you needed these movements, right? This really unlocks a lot of potential, right? There's a lot of movement there's a lot of traffic that wants to go from Kendall to Doral, and this greatly facilitates that. So that's actually heading into procurement in the very near future. I think, Juan, in the next couple of weeks, correct?
The documents are in procurement. We're working with Helen Cordero and her staff to put that out hopefully in the next 2 to 3 weeks, finalizing those documents. We're just coordinating that with 2 other procurements that are now taking a little bit more of a priority. So the express bus service is something we're looking to put out right away, as well as the 107th Avenue work that we want to do for the county. That's a project that we want to get out as soon as, hopefully within the next 2 or 3 weeks as well. I've been talking to Helen about that. And then the park and ride, this project, we're working with finance to make sure that we have the funding available to begin spending money once we procure. So we're timing that, but we're confident that we'll be able to hopefully advertise that next month as well.
And then I'll also note that there's a few projects on the arterial side, like Southwest 157th Avenue and Southwest 42nd Street, Bird Avenue, in that area, where Miami-Dade County, those are Miami-Dade County roads. Miami-Dade County has projects to widen those roads or extend them, but they were very far out. So we're working in partnership with Miami-Dade County to advance those projects. They're currently under design, and we'll be in a position to facilitate the construction of those so that they'll be in place with the Kendall Parkway, and the residents in the area won't have to wait for those. So it's a good partnership opportunity there that we're taking advantage of, where everybody can gain something from it. And with that, that's what I had.
If I could just make one comment on the Yes. opportunities. Right now, this is the initial plan and the way that we forecast doing it, but as we develop the plan further, we want to keep the delivery method dynamic, because we want to find the most efficient and effective way to deliver these projects. So if there's a change in our design, for example, we were talking about earlier, the issue with access to the Kendall park and ride or the Kendall bus stop, if there's a better way to procure that facility that makes sense, then we would change the delivery method. Maybe we don't separate it, maybe we make it part of the phase of the construction. But whatever we do, it's always going to be to find the most efficient and effective way to bring this product sooner to the public. Very good. Any questions? Board members? Yes. Board member Board.
So Rodriguez, 2 years ago, you had a staff count, a head count that was larger than what you have now.
Yes.
Do you have enough staff to manage these new endeavors that you have before you?
I will tell you, board members, we're down to 29 employees. I have discussed it with the CFO, and she will be bringing in staff. Our engineering side has always been with the consultant side. So I'm confident that we can handle it on the consultant side. But on the in-house finance procurement side, that's what I've been talking to Ms. Schaefer about, to see how we ensure that we can deliver these projects. We can't have a backlog.
Any other questions? Yes. Vice Chair.
Albert, I have a question. When we went to the public on this issue a few years ago, it was easily 95%, if not more, in support of this project. We've had pushback from other parts of the county against the project. My question to you is, what is the efforts that we're doing to ensure that those who are going to be most affected are still engaged to the same capacity they were when they were coming to our public meetings and our town halls? And, Mr. Chairman, I think you would agree, 95% without breaking a sweat was not just supportive, but urgently, strongly supportive of it. So my fear is that those who are more engaged now are those who are not going to be affected by this project and may have alternative motives to be involved. Are we making an effort to make sure those who are going to be involved, who are going to be affected, are still engaged? Because it's a long, drawn-out project. Those who are interested, who are activists against it because of the concern of the UBD or whatever other motives they have, whether it's environmental or financial, because I believe there are people who have some financial incentives in trying to stop this project. Are we making sure the people there who are going to be affected are still engaged? Because if we lose that, then it's an echo chamber, and the only thing you're hearing is about how bad this project is. So I'm curious about that.
You're absolutely right. So one of the efforts that we continue, and the next round of this will be in the last quarter of this year, so in the next few months, is update newsletters to the HOAs, the residents from that area. We're due for one, and we traditionally were doing them before around our public hearings, public meetings, but as those taper off, you're absolutely right, Mr. Martinez, that engagement needs to continue.
And it needs to be increased.
Agreed. So we have a plan to continue doing that. We will continue engaging them in that email newsletter, keeping them engaged. I'm envisioning it quarterly going forward.
More.
That's something we can do.
And let me explain to you why. There is a very strong opposition who will use a newsletter, an article, that the 6-minute article that you kept talking about. We need to combat that. And we need to combat that. If we're not going to get the information out through the press, we need to make sure that those who are going to be affected realize how important this is, so they don't lose their enthusiasm, all right? There's 600,000 residents of this county that are going to benefit from this. Because here's what I can tell you. Nobody here is going to benefit. We're all volunteers, and we're doing this for the community. So we have no stakes in this other than trying to do what we think is in the best interest of this county. That needs to be reminded to those individuals out there, because if this project isn't done, it's going to affect them more than anyone else. And I'm not sure to this date, Mr. Chair, their voice is truly being heard by those who are in opposition to this project. And I think we need to make sure they're aware of it so that they know who's in for it and who's against it and why. And I think that's our responsibility. And we have a database of emails from, I recall, that we developed that we should be using more aggressively.
Yes.
Agreed. And we will increase those efforts. Thank you.
That's all, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Yes, Boardman.
Is it a good opportunity when we deliver those checks prior November to include any type of communication? It's a good event, you're getting a
Great
check.
idea.
And
I think that's a great idea.
I do too.
An update on what's going on, and then also information to educate the public on what they're hearing, maybe in the media, but what we see, all right? And so, yeah, somebody who lives right next to the turnpike on Bird Road that gets on the turnpike in 2 minutes probably only saves 6 minutes, okay? But somebody who lives on 147th and Kendall, they're probably going to save a ton of money, I mean a ton of time. And so it's unfortunate that was the soundbite. There's a reason why that was the soundbite, really. And so, and also the EPA letter, and the way they write it, and the boy, the EPA is really against this. All of that the EPA wrote, that can all be mitigated, we can all account for it, and we can continue with this project. But there are a lot of people that don't live there that don't want this project. The people that live there, they want this project. And I don't know, anybody live in West Kendall on the board? So you're right, Vice Chair. We're fighting for something that probably none of us really will get much of a benefit of because we don't live out there. You do, okay. But for me as mayor, I represent those 600,000 people. And we as board members represent everybody here in Miami-Dade, and everybody deserves a good quality of life. And this project is sorely needed for that.
Question.
Yes.
Do we yet have a project website?
So we, on the MDX website, we do have a page dedicated to the project that's updated.
A page
It's a page.
for now?
But it has links to all the project documents and all the project occurrences. It's definitely something that is that needs to be maintained, needs to be updated.
I
on a
haven't
regular
visited.
basis.
How prominent and visible is it?
It's in the front page of our website. In the bottom, it says Kendall Parkway. You click on it, it takes you right to the,
If I log on right now, what is it, upper right?
it's right in the middle, right in the bottom. Right, when you open the page, right there.
I don't have to scroll. I mean, you know the attention span, so if it's not immediately on my screen, people don't tend to scroll. So, okay, good. So please visit our website to get more details on the Kendall Parkway.
Look, anybody who's opposed to this project or opposed to investing transportation dollars to highways is going to oppose this no matter what. We pay attention to the people that are affected daily, and we're trying to provide them choices, and that's what this is about, and do it in an environmentally respectful way
But
and effective.
we are doing that. So I
Look,
get a,
I've done project development my whole career, and we've done many projects that started off as, hell no, you can't build this, you're building it through the middle of sensitive, and it's a process. Look, the reason we do 10,000 pages of analyses is because the science has to be strong to withhold all of these attacks that go on for many, many, many years. So the science has to be very strong to support it, and this is a process. Again, if Mr. Sosa or anybody from the project team told us there's an area that we are susceptible, we'd be here and we'd be having to change it. I know that Mr. Wolf, Secretary Wolf, you've done PD&Es, and that's typically the way it works. We don't see anything here. There will be a lot of negotiation. There will be a lot of discussion and decisions that we make as a body moving forward.
if
We're
I,
open to it.
Go ahead.
if I may, on what you just mentioned on the fact that FDOT and us focus on highways. Interestingly enough, my son yesterday, my oldest, he's 26, he sends me a link to a chat room or some kind of whatever that he's a member of, and they're shaming FDOT and MDX for spending all our transportation dollars always only on highways. I said, okay, son, well, here's what you can say. Number one, that is a function of what we do. We can do, and it is called the Expressway Authority, and the Florida Department of Transportation certainly has a big chunk of highways, one. But number two, this project does assist the roadways, the regular roadways. Time and again, we can continue to repeat that. Yes, once someone gets on a highway, they're no longer on the roadways, on the thoroughfares, on the streets, on the courts, on the places, et cetera. So you are removing traffic from the regular circuitry of the neighborhood onto the highway. So yes, this is a benefit. And he was like, oh yes, that's a great answer. I'm gonna go type it up right now. But I love that he was out there trying to ask the question and inform the public. And I think that's a continuing job of ours, is to continue to deliver that message. Why anybody would, I mean, to your point, Mr. Mayor, I'm way up in the northeast of the county. This project does nothing for me, but I certainly believe in it.
Right.
I don't have to be a scientist or an engineer to read your reports, Albert, and come to the realization that is very much needed, or the thousands of letters, hundreds of letters that we received that day at the hearing. So everyone benefits on the roadways, on the highways, on our neighborhoods for the.
One thing that's a misnomer, and one thing that is continuously being put out, which is patently false, is that somehow if you build this and you spend $1 billion for this, you somehow have taken $1 billion for something else.
Correct.
Which is completely, utterly false. Because the only way that you're going to get the money for this is to build it.
Correct.
All right? If you don't build it, $1 billion just doesn't pop up out of anywhere, somewhere and say, oh, Joe, now we can use $1 billion for Metro Rail or expanding, mass transit somewhere. So we're not taking money away from anything, all right? We're creating a new infrastructure with the money that's generated by that infrastructure, and were it not for that infrastructure, that money wouldn't be there. And it's also, the people are choosing to pay for that infrastructure. We're not saying, hey, we don't put guards on Kendall and say, you must go to the Kendall Parkway, all right? They choose to take that because it'll improve their quality of life. People will choose that to improve their quality of life, and $1 billion just doesn't pop up. But people continue to try to misguide, misinform, because there is no other argument. If you built this road, then, you're not going to build mass transit. No, we're going to build mass transit with this road, all right? And if it weren't for this road, we couldn't build the mass transit because it's part of the entire project. So, it's a constant battle with people that, unfortunately, maybe that's their point of view, but I would hope they would be more intellectually honest. Not try to win the argument. To win the argument on solid your grounds. Don't win argument or try to win argument by misleading people into what this is and what this isn't. So, any other comments?
Just one more.
Okay, go ahead.
Since this is such a large project, would it make sense to have a separate identity from a marketing perspective, kendallparkway.org? That would be separate from MDX, and that we could point from our MDX website. We have a challenge in that we've got some negatives in front of us. So anything that is associated with us immediately loses a little bit of value. It loses a little bit of the shine, right? If it was a separate entity, a separate website that you could refer to it, obviously we would have a link back to ours, but if we could point to kendallparkway.org as a place that was dedicated to deal with all the FAQs, all the supports, all the videos, all the imaging, would that help us in our communication strategy?
Absolutely.
May
And
I-
Absolutely.
I agree and disagree with you, so let me explain both. So I asked about project website because I've had two huge projects, and they each had their individual website that I constantly updated content on. I think because of the negativity surrounding us, this cloud hanging over us right now, and this is such a great project that's going to help so many people, I want to utilize that. I want us to be able to finally start tooting our horn, which we've been so shy about since the beginning of the agency. I want us to take credit for that. But I agree with you from the perspective of having it be an independent website. I think the project is big enough that it should have its own website with tabs and the upcoming updates on and highlight the impact mitigation, all the good things that have come out of it. But I actually want to use this incredible project, this baby of ours, to dissuade some of those negative things. Absolutely, this is MDX. It is, and hashtag this is an MDX roadway. Absolutely, I want us to take credit for that.
And Luz, because she's done it, I would answer it the same way. And I would tell you, if we didn't have this cloud over us and Kendall Parkway was moving forward, Kendall Parkway takes a life of its own. It's that big of a program. It doubles our program in size. It's similar to what the Port Tunnel, the Miami Intermodal Center, there's numerous, I-4 in Central Florida. It takes a life of its own. And what ends up happening is you end up having that website and that link. Yes, it goes back to the DOT, but there's so much information. This project here is equivalent to all the money we've spent up to now, pretty much. So it will take a life of its own, so I agree with you. The problem is that there's a cloud. And the cloud, right now, we have to wait to get out of it. But I can see us going to the Kendall Parkway, whatever the .org or whatever it is, and it'll have a link to the rest of the agency. But it's going to take a lot of it. The industry, the community is going to demand it because it's going to consume us.
One question, can it be said that this Parkway, this project actually will enhance the SERP project? Make it easier for the federal government and the state government to initiate or actually complete their project?
So I believe it to be true, yes. So absent, right now, SERP is stalled in this area. There's in this 4 square mile area, what was the previous SERP area between Chrome, you see at the top of the screen, 157 at the bottom, Tamiami Trail, and Bird, that 4 square mile area was the focus. And the lighter reds, those little like light red hashes, that's all land that was previously purchased in the area with the intent of fulfilling this previous SERP project. So a lot of money was spent, tied up now in areas that South Florida Water Management District has turned around and said, we can't do what we thought we could with these lands, right? So they've invested a lot there already, and it's really not usable for them. So with this project and the fact that we're focusing our land purchases on that western half-mile strip, which is where the current SERP project really needs to be, but for us, there's not another funding source out there that's earmarked for this, right? So, but for us wanting to do this project, but for the Kendall Parkway, there's really not anything else moving this along. So I do believe that we're serving as a mechanism by which SERP can be advanced in this area, absolutely.
How much money do you think we're going to be spending on land acquisition that would, if it weren't for us, that the federal government would have to be spending to acquire that land? Because apparently they bought land they didn't need.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so now they're going to have to buy land they actually do need, but we're going to buy that land. So how much money is going to be put into buying land for the SERP project that the feds won't have to buy?
Just back of the envelope calculation, somewhere between $10 and $20 million, which represents, it's a good chunk of our project cost goes into right-of-way, and that specific right-of-way in that area will amount to about that much.
Okay.
If I may ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
Is this a one-for-one swap?
It is. So, and it's not unprecedented. Let me be clear about that. The DOI, South Florida Water Management District, with the Army Corps' acquiescence, have already done land swaps with FPL.
But their advantage is that the swapped land that they receive is in a better location for them.
And in this case, it would be similar also. So we would be swapping lands that they currently don't have a use for with lands that are more useful to them by being inside that half-mile conveyance concept that they currently have active. Correct. So I think it's a win-win for everybody involved. So it's not unprecedented. I think it's worthwhile. I think it's going to benefit the area. It's money that would otherwise have to be invested there from an unknown source at this point.
One final point. The land that we acquire will be kept undeveloped in perpetuity, given to Miami-Dade County?
That's correct. So part of the Comprehensive Development Master Plan Agreement, as part of this on-site mitigation, right, the fact that we have to mitigate in this vicinity, along with that, MDX will transfer those lands to Miami-Dade County once they're established, right? Because if you go out there, the wetlands in these areas are not necessarily the most pristine. They're actually, there's quite a bit of Melaleuca out there, Brazilian peppers, other invasives, and there's a lot of ATV activity in the area that further damages what you have. So our commitment is to purchase the land adjacent to it for conservation purposes, clean it up so you don't have these invasive species anymore, and if necessary, replant native species. That's not always necessary, but if it's necessary, right? And then we'll have to maintain it for a few years to make sure it's established, you don't get the invasives coming back in, and at that point, yes, transfer it to Miami-Dade County in perpetuity as a conservation area.
Never to be developed.
Correct.
Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Information.
Yeah, the procurement report is in your packet. Again, if there's any questions, it specifies. The only other issue, Mr. Chairman, on announcements is that we're also going to have a Finance Committee meeting on the 28th of October. That's where we're going to present audited financials, and we'll have the auditor here to present to the committee in your function as the audit committee, basically. Okay?
I noticed we have a reporter from the Herald that came here. He was not here for our financial report, and I think he may find some of the findings, or at least the preliminary findings of the state audit, to be very interesting.
Yes.
Okay, so make sure that we share it with him. That being said, we have our meetings. Excuse me?
I have one announcement.
Sure, absolutely.
So I learned today with Marie that I am the first female treasurer in the history of the agency. And at first I was very saddened by that, but then very proud. So
Congratulations.
thank you for the vote of
And that was
confidence.
a great report, by the way. Your first report was fantastic.
Thank
So,
you.
Well done. So with that, congratulations, and, you broke a barrier here.
Yes, I guess, wow.
So have a motion for adjournment?
Move.
Okay, so moved. This meeting is adjourned. We'll see you next month. Thank you.